Hi there, my name is Wendelin. I live in BC, Canada, and I'm 56 years old, and I've been a Christian all of my life, basically, other than a few turbulent years in high school. I've been walking the journey since then, and I've gone through different things like a car accident, hit by a drunk driver, got married in my 30s, got divorced about 3 years ago. So I've had my bits and pieces of challenges. I have two girls that are in their early 20s. Very blessed to have that. And I really thought that I was at the point in my life where things were turning around and settling in. I work with children, love my job, finally making decent pay doing that. It's a very high energy job, mind you, and I'm often tired from that, and you have had aches and pains with my back and my feet, etc., doing that. But at this point in my life, I'm very thankful for how God has worked in my life. So it's the end of June now, and 1 month ago, at the end of May 2020, during the COVID crisis, I found a lump in my breast when I was bathing. And that's when everything changed, as probably most of you who are watching know what that feels like. So I had suspicions that there was something in my breast like a year before, and I'd gone for a pap smear, and I was going to, I thought the practitioner would check my breast at that time, and she just kind of rushed through it and said, "Oh, we're not doing breast exams anymore. We're just going to do pap smears today. I've got a long list of patients, blah, blah, blah." And I was, actually feeling like I had wanted her to check because I had felt a little bit of tenderness there in the months previous. And anyways, I was too polite to say anything, so I didn't say anything. And then I promptly went back into my life, working my job and, distracted by the aches and pains in my body elsewhere. So a month ago, I found this lump in my breast. I knew it was quite large. It felt at least 2 inches in width, and it had a definite edge to it. Previous to that, my breast was just kind of dense. So I just kind of thought it was a menopausal thing, and I hadn't taken it seriously. But as soon as I felt it, I knew that it was something serious, and the other breast did not feel the same. So I immediately freaked out, of course, but didn't tell anybody. But called my GP the next day, and they got me in for a checkup. Even during COVID time, they let me come in physically. Doctor checked me over. He had a chaperone there, a nurse, which I was pretty impressed by. So it was all very professional. And he said, "Yeah, we're going to get you in ASAP for a mammogram, and they'll probably do and an ultrasound, and they will probably do a biopsy right away because we want to get this thing checked out as soon as possible." So that week was, of course, a very tough week. Any of you who have experienced this will know how your brain can go in many ways, or in all of these ways. It can shut down. You can panic. You can have great feelings of fear. You can think the worst case scenario, think you're going to die, start thinking about, oh, is my will okay? How are my children going to be without me? Afraid to read anything about it. I was, because it just made me think about the fact that I probably had cancer. I tried praying. It was very hard to pray. But we are blessed that we have the Holy Spirit with us. And I knew that, and the Spirit helped me pray through those times, as jumbled as they were. I had this, the way I figured out how to cope at that time was just to watch Netflix. I had just signed up for Netflix like the week before, finally caved. And that was a really good way of just helping me forget everything. And I watched this series called Heartland, which is a nice, easygoing series with not a lot of heavy drama. And so I did that. And then I also started thinking about, what if I lose my hair? I didn't want to be bald, seen that way. So I had first week, I had a fixation with wigs and watching YouTube's on people trying wigs on and seeing what they felt like, etc., etc. And I found that pretty fascinating, strangely enough. And sure enough, before the end of the week, I had ordered myself a couple of wigs just to make sure, because I knew they would take time to come from the States, that I would have something in case I would go bald. Not knowing when that would be, but it just made me feel better. So amazingly, they had me in to do the mammogram and the ultrasound and the biopsy in under a week's time. So that was amazing, although it did concern me that I thought, again, I must be dying. They're just rushing me through. But regardless, I went in for that. And by this time, I had just started researching a little bit about what actually happens on these visits. And I found that having information about the testing that would be going on and just information on cancer in general and breast cancer was actually making me feel better, not making me panic more. So that was kind of a turning point for me. And I would read and research or watch YouTubes and found that it actually settled my brain from just spinning in circles on just my own things that I would make up. Rather, I could hold on to a few of the facts. And it was also encouraging to see some testimonies out there from people who have gone through cancer. I only did find one YouTube video from someone that was a Christian, forthrightly, and I thought that was interesting because it really boosted my spirits to see somebody going through that and giving glory to the Lord for helping them make it through that journey easier. So that was not when I thought of doing this, but it just kind of struck me odd that there wasn't a lot more of this kind of thing out there. I also was looking for support groups, that kind of thing. I thought there'd be something on Facebook. Couldn't find that. Couldn't find anything locally. The local cancer clinic here in my city did have a support group, but it was for all kinds of cancer, and they only met once every month. And of course, they weren't meeting during this COVID time. So that was a no-go. I also let my pastor know from my church, and I said, if anyone in the church has gone through this or whatever, it would be nice if I had someone to kind of walk through this with me. So that's kind of where I was at that time. So we get to the day under a week's time, as I said, and I had the mammogram first. And when I got into the hospital, there were only like 4 patients allowed in the waiting room because we had to be socially distanted. And, we all had our little smocks on, and they open at the front. And I thought I was going to be okay, but then I started panicking a little bit. But fortunately, there was another chatty woman in the waiting room, and we struck up a conversation just talking about COVID in general. And that was really comforting, just to have my mind drawn away from what was happening to me. So, if you're in that kind of situation, and now I try and do it myself, is I just strike up conversations with other people, knowing that there's probably people freaking out quietly there, sitting there beside me. So it's just one little way that you can reach out and offer some friendliness and some caring to people around you. So the mammogram wasn't a very big deal, wasn't very painful. I'd had a mammogram like over 10 years ago, and the machines have come a long way since then. I was like, these are much different now. And she right away said, oh yeah, it's no problem finding the lump. And then, so then we went back to the waiting room, waited to get in for the ultrasound, and that's when they go over and they check you more thoroughly on your back. And so she found the main lump. So the main lump was basically 2 centimeters by 3 centimeters by 4 centimeters in size. So quite sizable, probably about a third of my breast. She found another little lump on my left breast, quite small. She didn't seem too concerned about it. She thought it was probably just some fatty fibroid tissue. But then she also found a node that was inflamed in my lymph node area. And she didn't say anything, of course, but I was watching the screen. I'm like, you found something in my lymph nodes too. And she was measuring it out, and I'm like, and she just nodded, and I'm like, oh, great. So that was that. And then they called in, I stayed in there, and they called in a doctor to come and do the biopsy. And he looked at it, and he said, I could tell you that this is nothing. It's going to just go away. It's just fibroid. But he says, I can't tell you that because we are concerned about this. And so they did the biopsy. So not knowing what a biopsy for this area is like, I thought I'd describe it a little bit to you. So they do, they give you a little shot to numb the area in 2 or 3 places. And for me, because they try and do it from 2 different locations. And the actual biopsy tool is kind of like, it kind of looks like an earring thing that they put holes in your ears with, and it kind of makes the same sound. It's kind of like a punching gun kind of thing. And so they did that in 2 different places on my tumor. And that didn't hurt too badly. And then they said, we're just going to put a couple little titanium chips in there. And that is to mark where we've taken the biopsy from, so that down the road, if they do find anything, or they will know exactly where that sample was taken from. I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's smart. They said you won't notice it. It's not going to set off anything at the airport, but it's just a marker that will stay in there permanently. And so they did that, and that was the part that hurt. Because they have to, it's not really fast, they have to slowly put it in, and they've got to position it exactly where the biopsy came from. So that I screamed and made faces, and not screamed, I squirmed. Did not scream, I'm a little more mature than that. But yeah, so they did that, and then they just clean you up. There's no stitches. They tell you the numbing will be gone shortly, and it's normal to have bruising, etc. They give you a little bit of a gauze to protect the open areas, and they sent me home with a little ice pack thing that you could put on there topically for some relief. And so that was it. Drove myself home. All of this was done. I was home by 9:30 in the morning because I had my appointment first thing in the morning. So I was back home before my daughter, who lives with me, even got up, which was fortunate because I hadn't told her anything. I didn't want to worry my girls needlessly about it if it wasn't cancer. But by this time when I got home, I knew that it was like 99% going to be cancer. So